Science fiction in feature animation, it's pretty much non-existent. Very, very, very few science fiction feature films are made, and even when they are made, they're not necessarily always all that good, so they wouldn't be worthy of a list. So instead, I'm doing a list of the best in animated science fiction. Animated science fiction as far as the movies that they have made, plus straight-to-DVD movies, plus TV series, plus straight-to-DVD series. So there's a plethora of those types of science fiction animated cartoons, but not necessarily movies. So I'm just going to clump all of it together, and I'm going to make my top 10 best in animated science fiction. Hi, my name is Luis Escobar. I'm a storyboard artist on the Simpsons television show. I've been working on the show for 20 plus years now, and let me get started with science fiction because it's one of my favorite genres. Science fiction is one of my favorite genres, and I really, really want to watch more science fiction animation. And I would love there to be more science fiction animated feature animation. So let me begin. My number 10 is Futurama. Well, you could watch Futurama in a lot of different places. You could watch it on Netflix, where I highly, highly recommend you watch the show. It is a great, funny, fantastic show. It just makes fun of the genre overall. It's really disappointing that it was canceled, but it is really fantastic. Please watch Futurama if you love sci-fi, because it is a satire on all things sci-fi. So I highly recommend it. My number 10 is Futurama. My number 9 is my first Japanese cartoon on the list, and that's Cowboy Bebop. Cowboy Bebop, about two bounty hunters in space and the crew of crazies that end up joining them. We've got a very deep through line throughout the whole story, and it kind of, I think, and it ends really dramatically. It's really interesting. You don't know where these characters are going. It's great. The character designs are great. The art is great. The universe that this takes place in is very cool. Spaceships are fantastic. The warping, and it's cool. So I highly recommend this show, the series Cowboy Bebop. My number 8, I've dedicated an entire video to this series, and that is Giant Robo Boy and his robot surrounded by the experts of justice. God, Giant Robo! And then it's just like the fighting and the action and adventure, and it's beautifully drawn. And I did a whole entire post. You could just watch that. It's 10 minutes long. That's how much I rave about this show. I highly recommend watching this. My number 8 best in sci-fi animated cartoon, Giant Robo. My number 7 is a classic. I don't know how many people haven't heard about this movie. Akira! Akira is the name of the weird boy that blew up. Yeah, it's about a boy who blew up a city named Akira. And so they had to erect Neo-Tokyo around the explosion site. It turns out that there's some kind of thing about evolution and experimentation with humans, and about energy that can't be contained, and it's basically about a bicycle gang that kind of gets involved in the middle of all this thing. And you know, it's amazing. It's one of the most fully animated anime movies you'll ever see. It's one of the rare animated Japanese movies where the dialogue was recorded first, and then the mouths actually work with the dialogue, the Japanese dialogue, because usually in Japan it's done the other way around. They animate it first and then they record the dialogue. In America it's done the other way. The audio is recorded first and then you animate to the audio. Well, in Japan, they did it kind of the Western way in this, so it's a little bit more fully animated than most anime you'll actually see. It's a beautiful, beautiful movie. Akira is my number 7. My number 6 I don't own, again, because there is no American distributor of this movie. You'll have to find it online in the translation sites, and that is MASCS Frontier. My number 1 animated series, I believe, or my number 2. I talk about it in other lists, but this is basically, they take the idea of Robotech from the 80s, and this is, Macross is basically what Robotech actually was in Japan. And Robotech, they took that, and this is years into the future, takes place in another spaceship with another different type of set of aliens, and it's got a, again, love triangle. It follows kind of like the Robotech formula, but it veers off of it. It's got transforming robots. The fighting is incredible. The story is so much fun. Highly recommend it. Really great sci-fi. My number 6 is MASCS Frontier. My number 5 I also don't own. In fact, it's kind of impossible to own unless you download it from iTunes or from Amazon via digital. There is no DVD copy of this show, and that is Tron Uprising. Tron Uprising is based on the movie, the sequel to Tron Legacy. It kind of takes place in between Tron and Tron Legacy. It's called Tron Uprising, and it's the story about a guy who becomes Tron's protege, so that he goes and tries to liberate the grid from the bad guy who basically conquered the grid. It's beautiful. I dedicated an entire post just on Tron Uprising. I'll link to it in my blog below, so I highly recommend watching Tron Uprising. For my number 4, I do own, but I forgot to bring it up. My number 4 is The Iron Giant. The Iron Giant. What can I say? There's a giant robot from outer space that lands in the town in Maine, and the little boy who found the giant robot and befriends it. Little did he know that the robot is actually not the nice guy it seems, but it's meant to be a weapon. It's really interesting. There's a lot of really, really good things in this movie. Written and directed by Brad Bird, who also wrote The Incredibles and directed The Incredibles. Iron Giant, if you haven't seen it, watch it. It's one of the best Warner Brothers movies that came out of the Warner Brothers studios back in the 90s. Yeah, I highly recommend it. The Iron Giant. My number 3 is, I'm cheating here, it's an entire series. Just about anything with the name Gundam in it is going to be great sci-fi. This is the original Gundam. This is the sequel Gundam Zeta Gundam. Yeah, Gundam, anything with Gundam in it is pretty good. There's some really, really bad ones out there, but generally, as a rule, most of the Gundam series is really pretty good. The great sci-fi. What makes Gundam robots unique, it was the very first time that any robot was actually used as what it was, which is a giant tank. It didn't have any kind of sentient kind of being. It didn't have a soul. It was just a machine. You get in it, and it's more about the pilot's skill. It does have to do with the quality of the machinery in the robot, but a lot more of it has to do with the pilots and the drama around the pilots, and that's one of the things that they really play up in later versions of the Gundam series in the different reboots of the shows. These robots have lightsabers, and these lightsabers they came up with the lightsaber idea for these Gundams before they had seen Star Wars. Star Wars hadn't come up with it yet, and they were already producing this. So when Star Wars showed up, they were like, "Oh man, they're going to think that we stole the idea from Star Wars," but these guys actually came up with the laser sword idea as well around the same time that Star Wars showed up. Interestingly enough, the pilots tend to have kind of Jedi-ish powers, at least in the original version of Gundam. So that's my number 3, Gundam. My number 2 is Clone Wars. Either one, Genndy or Dave Filoni. Star Wars Clone Wars. These shows are sci-fi and Star Wars, and if you love Star Wars, you love these. That's it. That's the end. You want to watch these, period. Science fiction, Star Wars, enough said. Watch it. This is the best in science fiction you can possibly get. So much so that I dedicated one blog post just for the Genndy type Star Wars Clone Wars and one for the Dave Filoni Star Wars. And I even compare the two and tell you which one I think is better. or if there is even a fight at all. So I highly recommend watching this series of any one of these series of Star Wars Clone Wars. Okay, my number one best in sci-fi animated movies, The Incredibles. This is the second one in this list that is actually an American feature animated science fiction movie. Both feature animated science fiction movies that I've mentioned in this list come from the same person, Brad Bird. Written and directed by Brad Bird, same person that wrote and directed Iron Giant. This is science fiction because it's got superheroes and they're fighting giant robots and all kinds of different things, and it's science fiction from the 50s or the 60s, I should say. It's great. I love it. Fantastic. This is what American science fiction can be. It really needs to be pushed more in this direction, I think. Yes, there's WALL-E. It didn't make the list because the other stuff I think that I have on my list, I mean, seriously, I really do think Futurama is better than WALL-E. The Incredibles, the best in sci-fi, my number one. So what do you think of my list? I really do like to hear your opinions on this stuff. This video is actually meant to be watched on my website. On my website, you're going to see the entire list with all the descriptions, but on top of that, you'll also see videos, trailers for every single one of these movies, so you can get a taste of all the movies and what they're like. If you're already on my blog, why not subscribe to my newsletter if you haven't already done so? If you do, you get a free copy of my book, Angel Cowgirl, which is my art of book. If you don't want a free digital copy of the book, you could get that book on Amazon. Just subscribe to my newsletter and you'll get a free copy of my book. Alright then. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.